Hello everyone, welcome to this lecture 2 of week 11 where we had been discussing about sales forecasting, and in today's sessions we will dive deep into the topic of modeling trends and seasonality. We will look into why it is important to take the trend and seasonality separately in sales forecasting, and what are the different domains on which there will be an impact of the sales forecasting. So, all these aspects we will look into one by one. So, let us first try to understand why the trend and seasonality matter. First important aspect from which we can look into the importance of trend and seasonality is that demand planning. Basically, the forecast decide how much we have to make in an upcoming season or financial year, or how much we have to keep stock of, whether the stock should be kept at a particular store or at a distribution center or any other logistic hubs. So, all these aspects can be covered, all these aspects can be decided with information with the help of looking into trend and seasonality and the forecasting numbers. Overall, what we can say that we can do a proper planning for our upcoming demand in the upcoming financial year or any time period, defined time frame. Then the next importance of sales forecasting in terms of trend and seasonality comes from the dimension of workforce and capacity. Let's say my current demand is 1 lakh unit per year, and I can anticipate that in the next year there will be a total demand of 1,50,000 units. So, if I have to produce 1,50,000 units instead of 1 lakh units, then in that case I might need some more workforce, I might need some more human resources. So, for that reason I have to recruit some new people for the upcoming financial year. So, those things can be well planned in advance. So, that is why the sales forecasting in terms of trend and seasonality helps you identify the requirement of upcoming workforce, and it also helps you from the same angle. We might require some more equipment, we might require some more other capital intensive resources. So, that has to planned a priori, right. So, that is why the sales forecasting helps us to do the proper planning in terms of workforce deployment and in terms of capacity building, infrastructural capacity building. Basically, if I go point by point, it helps us in staffing, it helps us in identifying the delivery slots, it helps us in production capacity, identification of how much production capacity will be required in order to address the upcoming demand. So, wrong forecast cause the overtime spikes, service delays and idle capacity. So, let us say I have forecasted the sale to be 1,50,000 units, but in reality it turned out to be only 1,10,000 units. Then for this additional 40,000 units, there is a possibility that I have already hired some human resources to whom I have to pay. I have already purchased some excess capacity which will fall idle. So, that is why you need to be very careful when you are forecasting the sales. So, you need to take all the relevant factors into consideration in terms of trend, in terms of seasonality, in terms of some isolated event, or in terms of how much you are spending on let us say promotion, how much you are spending on accessibility. So, all these factors needs to be taken into consideration. Then another aspects which is being impacted by the sales forecasting is the finance and cash flow. Revenue forecast feed the budgeting, because we know in the next financial year instead of 1 lakh unit I will be able to sell 1,50,000 units. So, I definitely it is going to impact my overall revenue for the next financial year, and accordingly I have to plan for my operating cash inflow, cash outflow. So, that is why my sales forecasting is directly impacting my finance department. It is directly impacting my finance, it is directly impacting my cash flow. So, it helps you in cash planning and working capital. Working capital means inventory tie up cash, stock out reduce cash inflows. Then you can do the margin projections, and it is dependent on the expected mix of marketing, right. Next one is the marketing effectiveness. How do I measure the marketing effectiveness? Most of the time it is through the return on investment. Basically the marketing teams need a baseline forecast. What is baseline forecast? If I look at the, if I try to put the sales forecasting in a linear regression equation, the intercept is the baseline forecast. So, it is interpretation wise, it is what would have been sold anyway in absence of anything, in absence of any marketing effort, it would have been sold. So, that is called a baseline forecast. These marketing teams need a baseline forecast to estimate the incremental lift from the promotions or the ads. So, unless and until you are unable to identify the baseline forecast, you will not be able to predict, or you will not be able to separate out the incremental lift. Means, I mean, how much of the total sales can be attributed to a promotional event. That is an important aspect, because it helps us in calculating the cost benefit analysis of a promotional event. Let us say there can be one case where the baseline is overstated, then ROI looks worse than reality, because baseline itself is kept so higher than it deserves. Then in that case the incremental sales will be reduced. So, that is why the ROI will be compromised, ROI will be underestimated, right. Then next comes regarding the pricing and promotions decisions. In multiple sessions we have discussed that your revenue, quantity demanded of a product is a function of price of the product, fine. So, that is why, I mean, quantity demanded means what? The forecasting of the quantity. So, in a way your quantity demanded, your forecast is also, I mean, there is an interrelations between these two variables, the sales forecast and the price. Seasonality affects the normal demand without adjusting for the seasonal peaks or troughs. You may mistakenly credit a promotion for what was simply a seasonal upswing, right. So, what happens basically in, let us say, in the month of December during the Christmas time, or in the month of October during the Diwali time, there is always a spike of orders, spike of demand, irrespective of the price, irrespective of anything. So, now let us say if you initiate an advertisement in the month of October and you try to attribute the additional sales to the promotion, then probably you are doing the wrong thing, because even in absence of that particular promotion, there would have been more sale in the month of October and December because of this festival season, right. So, you need to carefully separate these out. So, that is why it is important to understand the seasonality. You need to look into the historical record and see which particular month has more than the average sale, and accordingly you can decide on a seasonal index. Then next one is, next important factor is cross functional alignment. A single agreed forecast becomes the one number used by the sales, also by the supply chain team, also by the finance team, reducing the conflict and improving the overall execution at various levels, such as service level, fill rate or on time delivery. Basically, if you have a universal sales forecast, then in that case everybody will be on the same page when it comes to what is the anticipated amount of sales for this given period of time, be it a marketing team, be it a production team, be it a finance team, be it a HR team. So, everybody will be on sync. So, that is why it is important to look into the forecast in terms of all the relevant factors, including trend and seasonality, to make a cross functional alignment. Now let us try to look into this baseline cells. So baseline cells is basically an anchor concept. Baseline is, as I have already said, interpretation wise, it is what you expect to sell, all else equal. All other factors remaining the same, what is the amount of units that you are going to sell. So I mean baseline is sales is that amount of sale which cannot be attributed to a special promotional event, which cannot be attributed to a special season. So that is what is my baseline sales. Statistics wise, if I look into the regression equation, the intercept of that equation is called the baseline sales. Baseline sales are the level expected without significant marketing activities. Baseline is complex and inexact in practice. Why it is inexact in practice? Why it is complex? Why it is difficult to identify the baseline sales? Because marketing is often always on. There is one or the other promotional activity in place most of the time, and that is why it is extremely difficult for somebody to separate out the baseline sales from the incremental sales. It is a complex phenomenon and it needs a deeper understanding of the market factors. But at the same time, though it is complex, it is very crucial, because then only we can do a cost benefit analysis of our promotional events, of our marketing investment. In case the baseline is wrong, the promo return on investment and the incremental sales will also be wrong. That is why there will be an attribution error to the promotional investment. Moving forward, we will try to look into this seasonality bias and correct benchmarking. So what we have to do? We have to compare the like with the like to avoid the false conclusion, right? So if I mean this is also related to the attribution problem. So what needs to be attributed? For example, if in the month of October there is a spike of sales and there is also a promotional event in place, then all the additional sales, all the sales which is above the average sales of the particular year should not be attributed entirely either to the seasonal index or entirely to the promotion in place. And that is why many firms use the historic sales as the baselines. It is the easiest way to do, but again it does not tell you the entire story. If many marketing initiatives are in place, then in that case it will give you a wrong baseline sales. Another aspect that you need to look into, through which you can actually proceed towards looking into the baseline sales in a correct way is use the same store sales to remove the changes due to the store count. Let us say you are increasing the distribution, you are increasing your reachability in the market. Obviously, it is quite obvious that your overall demand is going to surge, right? So that is why whenever you are calculating the baseline sales, you should use the concept of same store sale, so that we are not counting something as baseline sale which is coming because of the increase in awareness level and increase in distribution level. Third aspect through which we can look into is compare a period to the same period in the prior year to avoid the seasonality bias. Let us say average sale in the last year was 1000 unit per month, but in the last year also I can see that though average sale for the entire year was 1000 unit, in the month of October the number of units sold was 1100 units, and the same pattern can be seen in many previous years, that the overall sale in the month of October is higher than any average sale in the entire year. So now in this case, for this year also, for the month of October we will compare the data of the month of October of the previous years rather than just looking at the average of the previous year. So if we are doing that, we are taking into consideration the seasonality concept, the seasonality impact. So now the same can be extended to week level, the same can be extended to day level, right. So, Wednesday should be compared with Wednesday, Saturday should be compared with Saturday. If I take the example of a restaurant business, then in that case normally on Saturdays and Sundays the sale will be more. So, I cannot just compare one Tuesday with a Saturday, because there is a seasonality in place. Okay. So, compare the week 40 this year versus the week 40 last year, not the week 40 versus the week 10 of the last year. It is a non-comparable thing. So, that is why you need to look into the seasonality part of the analysis. Next, the practical seasonality method. How can we look into seasonality from a practical standpoint? Year on year seasonal baseline. So, this period is approximately the same as the corresponding period of last year. So, this is kind of a naive application. So, where we assume that whatever happened in the last year is most likely to happen in the next year, right. Then same store year on year. Rather than looking into the entire macro business, we will look into the same store year on year businesses. Remove the store expansion or the shrinkage effect, right. Then seasonal index, average of this month related to the overall average. So, with this I can actually calculate something called a seasonal index. Let us say I will reiterate the same example that I have cited just now. So, in the for the entire year the average sale per month was 1000 unit, but for the month of October I could see that average sale was 1100 units. So, in this case the seasonal index for the month of October will be 1100 divided by 1000, that is 1.1. So, if this seasonal index is more than 1, then in that case that particular season has a spike. On the other hand, there can be a possibility in the month of July, though the average sale for the year is 1000 units, for the month of July it was 900 units. So, in this case the seasonal index will be 0.9. So, if the value of seasonal index is smaller than 1, then in that case that particular season we are selling lesser than the average sale. If it is more than 1, that particular year, that particular season we are selling more than the average sale. Fine. Then we can also look into this calendar events like holidays, festivals, payback weeks, etc. Okay. So, the idea behind this analysis is to separate out the various effects, otherwise there can be spurious results. Now, let us look into how to build a seasonal index. So, what we can do, first thing that we have to do is we have to assume the last year monthly sales in terms of units. Let us say the average monthly sales was 1000 units and for the month of December it was 1600 units. Therefore, the December seasonal index is 1600 divided by 1000, that is 1.6. Now, how to look into this? So, this is the first 3 boxes are part of the modeling. This is the seasonality modeling. Based on this seasonality modeling, we have seen that December has a seasonal index of 1.6. Now, how can you deduce it or how can you apply it in our data? So, if the December sales are 1760 units, the deseasonalized level is 1760 divided by the seasonal index, that is 1.6, and it gives us a value of 1100 units, right. So, what does this mean? How can you interpret this particular phenomenon? Sales look high because it is December and because the level is about 1100 units, right. So, average level, if this is the sales of December, we can say that for this particular year the average sale is likely to be 1100 units. Now, let us look at this trend modeling choices. We have seen the seasonality part, let us look into the trend part of it. Trend means, we know the meaning of trend means whether it is in growing phase, it is in shrinking phase or it is in flat phase. Basically, it shows you the how the demand of a particular product or a particular brand is growing. So, there can be flat level, that is the stable baseline, baseline remains the constant. So, there is no change in the baseline. So, What does it mean? The trend remains flat, the trends remains the same, right. Then there can be another one, that linear trend. So, what does linear trend refers to? Basically every year or every season you will expect some growth in the sales, and that particular growth is a, let us say, constant number. So, this year last year you sold 100 units, this year you can just, every year it is increased by 5 units. So, this year you will be selling, you are expected to sell 105 units, next year again 110 units, 115 units and so on. Then there can be a growth trend. So, growth trend is something like compounding. Every year the sale that you are anticipating is a percentage of the current year or the previous year's number. So, let us say if it is going at 10% increase rate. So, last year the sale was 100 units, this year it will be 110 units, and in the next year it will be 10% of the recent value, that is 110. So, 10% of 110 is 11. So, it will be 121 units and so on. So, it is not a constant value, rather it is the percentage of the most recent year sales. So, this is covered under growth trend. Then piecewise trend, new trend after a structural change. So, what might happen in the business dynamics is, it is neither a constant number, it is not a growth oriented number which is a percentage of the previous year, it is rather depending on your business expansion, business dynamics. You have introduced new channel, probably you have generated, the market itself has generated some new accounts. There is a change in the competitive landscape, so that is why the market dynamics is changing, and there is some regulatory changes in place. Then last one is the tie back. The trend versus the blip decision is exactly this modeling choice. What does it mean? We should be able to identify whether a particular increase in sales, it belongs to the trend part, or does it belong to the seasonality part, or is it belong to something like a isolated event, right. So, isolated event can be something like this. For example, I am running a grocery shop. So, my average sale for the year per day I used to sell 20,000 rupees. I used to collect a revenue of 20,000 rupees, and I also see that during the month of October my average collection is 25,000, right. But I can see in the November it is again 20,000, but I can see that there is a nearby my place, there is a music festival on a particular day. So, that particular day it might spike to 50,000, because it is a kind of rare event. I cannot attribute this 50,000 to anything else. If I am a smart forecaster, then in that case I should be able to identify that I am collecting this revenue, this 50,000, but I cannot attribute it either to any promotional event or to any seasonality or to any trend. I have to attribute it to that event. Then only it will not impact the future forecasting. Okay. So, I should be able to identify whether is it a part of the trend or is it a part of the blip. Now, let us look into this driver based sales projection. So, normally whenever we are doing a sales projection, it is a multivariate equation, but at its core sales is dependent on the number of customers you are having, that is your customer base, and what is the behavior of those customers. Are they heavy users? What is the frequency at which they used to purchase the product, and what is the quantity of product that they used to purchase in each of their transactions. So, it at its core it depends on these three factors. So, projections of the sales can be equated to these three factors, that is penetration, means what is your customer base, multiplied by frequency of purchase, multiplied by units per purchase. So, when should we use this equation? When the demand depends on the customer base, repeat behavior and the basket size. Basically, at its core the demand is dependent on these three factors. Let us quickly look into this example, sales projections using the driver model. So, assume for the next month, let us say the penetration, means the market reachability for your brand is 20,000 buying customers, your customer base is 20,000, frequency is 1.5 units per purchases per customer per month, and units per purchase is equal to 2 units. So, that is why for the upcoming month your total forecast should be 20,000 multiplied by 1.5 multiplied by 2, that is 60,000 unit. Now, how can you forecast the sales for a new product? You know, for an existing product it is slightly easier because you already have the market information, you already have the market experience. So, no doubt you can use the objective models, but for an existing product even subjectivity goes a long way in predicting the sales for the near future to a higher extent. But in case of a new product, because you do not have any understanding about the market, you do not know the customer behavior in the market, you do not have a first hand experience. So, it is in that case probably what you can do is, the best thing that it could be done by you is that, because you have not seen the customer behavior, only thing you can try to simulate the customer behavior, and best way to do that is doing a market research, doing a market survey. So, what kind of questions are you going to ask in your market survey? Whether you are likely to buy or not, what is your perception? So, all these things can be captured. So, it can be like somebody will respond you as I will definitely buy, I am likely to buy, I do not know whether I will buy or not, I am not likely to buy, I will definitely not buy. So, in a Likert scale you can capture this information. So, again for people who have claimed that they will definitely buy, only 80% of them are likely to buy, and people who have said that let us say they are likely to buy, only 30% of them are likely to buy. So, convert these top 2 boxes, because you are concerned about these top 2 boxes, other 3 boxes are basically none of them are going to purchase your product, even if some of them purchase, it is a rare number, I mean it is a very not rare, what is this called, it is a very insignificant number, fine. So, adjust for the awareness and availability distribution. So, let us say if let us say 30% of the total respondent have said that they will definitely buy, and let us say 50% of the total respondent have said that they are likely to buy. Okay. So, there are certain assumptions. So, what are those assumptions? They will likely to buy or they will definitely buy provided the product is accessible to them, it is available at their convenience, it is available at their nearby outlet, right. So, that is why whenever you are forecasting for the new product, though you will be looking into the top 2 boxes, you will also need to account for what is the awareness level, overall awareness level, and what is the distribution intensity. So, what you can do, adjust for the awareness and availability of distribution, that is all commodity value, and through that you can actually calculate a, rather than a trial rate, you are going to calculate a adjusted trial rate. Adjusted trial rate equal to trial rate multiplied by awareness multiplied by all commodity volume. So, we will look into this with examples. Look at this example. Survey result says that definitely buy is 20% of the respondent, probably buy is 50% of the respondent, and if we go by this logic that 80% of the definitely buy will actually are going to actually try this product. So, 0.8 multiplied by 0.2 plus 0.3, that is only 30% of the probably buy section will actually try the product. So, 0.3 multiplied by 0.5, that is 0.31, means 31%. So, 30% of the respondent are going to try this product. So, this is what is called the trial rate, but we are more concerned about the adjusted trial rate. Trial rates, adjusted trial rate is a polished version of the trial rate, which also takes into consideration 2 more factors, that is the awareness level as well as the distribution intensity. So, I will calculate the adjusted trial rate by multiplying the trial rate with the awareness level and the all commodity volume. Then we can calculate the trial population. So, trial population is I mean total target population multiplied by adjusted trial rate. And then once we calculate the trial population, we can also calculate the trial volume, trial population multiplied by units per purchase. So, that will give me the forecast, that is the trial volume, and that becomes my forecasting for the upcoming session, upcoming time frame. So, now let us quickly go through this case study of Walmart holiday forecasting and forecasting anomalies. So, what Walmart does in terms of forecasting? So, it uses various AIML inventory system that learn from the past sales pattern and apply predictive analytics to decide how much stock to position and where this stock should be kept, whether it is in the distribution center or it is in the outlet or it is in the, let us say, wholesale, and ahead of the seasonal peaks. They plan it much ahead because that helps you doing the proper planning, doing the proper logistic management. So, what do they feed in the model? It combines the historical sales with the leading demand indicators. These leading demand indicators are important. What are these leading demand indicators? It can be the online search behavior. If more and more people are looking for a smartphone, then it is likely that there will be a spike of smartphone demand in the upcoming session. So, they will look into the online search behavior and the page views, and based on that they will adjust for these factors, plus other contextual signals to anticipate the demand shift earlier than the POS data alone. Point of sales data, they will definitely consider the point of sales data, but over and above that they will also look into the consumer behavior in the or the prospects behavior in the digital space. Then seasonality lesson that can be learned from this one is that it separates the repeatable seasonal patterns from the one-off spikes. What is seasonal and what is related to a special event can be separated out. This system is designed to avoid overlearning for the rare shocks. It can effectively discount or forget the anomalies. So, basically in this particular system, when we talk in terms of numbers, it can remove the outliers when indexing the trend and seasonality. Okay. So, this is how we can actually look into what is the baseline sales, look into what is the trend, whether what is the trend index, whether it is 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, and what is the seasonality index, and what can be attributed to a special event or special occasion. So, in this way if we calculate, then our prediction, our forecasting for the sales for the near future will be accurate, and it streamlines all the departments. It streamlines the marketing department, it streamlines the HR department, it streamlines the production department, and it also streamlines the finance department. So, this is what is importance of forecasting through sales and trends and seasonality. Thank you. I will stop here today, and in the next class I will see you with a new topic. Thank you.